here today with Nigel Pugh, Consulting Director for the Asia-Pacific region at Ovum. Nigel, how would you define ultra broadband?
Well, I think ultra broadband, the definition has moved over time. So originally, ultra broadband would have meant moving from 8 megabits per second to 20 megabits per second. But nowadays, I think it's fairly reasonable to assume that ultra broadband is 50 megabits per second to 100 megabits per second and upwards. But I think there's other definitions that you can put into ultra broadband, and I think one of them would be quality of service. I think that's a very important aspect now of broadband networks, and if you're going to be an ultra broadband network, then I think having quality of service in that network is very important. And another factor which isn't linked to the network electronics per se, but is ubiquity. And having a ubiquitous ultra-fast broadband network is also very important and differentiates from the older broadband networks, which were tended to be piecemeal in their approach. We've seen in a lot of clients that we work with that ubiquity factor is an inhibitor for them to deploy ultra-fast services, because they know that they have a mix of end customers on their network, and so they have to really tailor their applications to the lower speed customers because they know not everyone can have ultra-fast broadband. So I think another important definition is having a ubiquitous network, which you see in national broadband networks.
How close today are operators to meeting this definition?
Well, I cover Asia-Pacific region, and there's a variety of levels of ultra-fast broadband per country. So countries like South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong have deployed ultra-fast broadband networks. Other countries are in the process of deploying them, such as Malaysia and China. And then others are getting ready to deploy in countries like New Zealand and Australia. So there's a mix throughout Asia, but there's certainly a clear path towards ultra broadband networks.
How can network operators make money from ultra broadband, and what sort of services can they offer?
Yeah, so this is clearly an important question. And there's a range of responses. I think, first of all, if you look at it from a pipe of them being a pipe provider, then clearly if you're going to be an ultra-fast broadband pipe provider, you need to be one of the most efficient pipe providers in the market. It's all very well for operators to look upwards in terms of content applications and IPTV, etc., but what they really have to focus on, as well as that, is making sure that their network deployment is as efficient as possible, and so they're not spending too much on that network. So cost saving from a network point of view, building an all-IP network, etc., is clearly important. Then they need to look at how they price those services, and we're seeing a lot more focus on fair usage policies and also on quality of service pricing type patterns to get more ARPU from a customer for different types of broadband services. Then, of course, an operator can move upwards through the application layers and start to look at infrastructure as a service or software as a service or IPTV type products. And of course, you can't forget the basic services such as voice, IPTV, broadband access, etc. So we're certainly seeing video services take off in the business enterprise market with video conferencing capabilities and immersive video interactions. We're also seeing that now enter the lounge room with internet-enabled televisions connected to a high-speed broadband network, and so we expect to see a fairly large rise over time in video conferencing for consumers.
Do you have any specific examples of how ultra broadband is benefiting a national economy today?
Well, look, from a national perspective, it's clear that governments see a lot of benefits in high-speed broadband networks. They will often cite improvements in education, in healthcare, etc. And we're seeing individual initiatives around those. There's also been a lot of studies done showing the benefits of the digital economy or the ICT industry on the economy at large, and what that means for an increase in jobs, increases in GDP, etc. But when we start to analyse, well, what are the effects from a national perspective on ultra-speed broadband, it's difficult to differentiate the benefits between ultra-speed broadband and regular speed broadband. So I think that's still work in progress in terms of the defining the actual benefits to the national economy, but it's the consensus is that it will have benefits.
How is ultra broadband an enabler for future cloud computing services?
So the network is always been critical to cloud computing, and it's also been one of the inhibitors in the take-up of cloud computing. And this gets back, I think, to your original question on the definition of ultra broadband, and having it ubiquitous so that it's available to, say, a multi-site business, or having quality of service for critical applications, having reliable broadband networks, has always been an inhibitor to the take-up of cloud computing. But with the rollout of ultra broadband, these inhibiting factors are being overcome, and although those networks are still being rolled out, it's clear they will be continued to be rolled out, and therefore they are a strong enabler for cloud services. And because they're being rolled out and will continue to be rolled out, we're seeing a lot of investment in cloud-based services.
Nigel, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.